one of the biggest confusion points that we noticed that people had about levels in the industry was that no one knew what the leveling would translate to at another company if they were to switch companies. That kind of gave us the light bulb for why not just create like a very simple way to compare levels across companies. Very shortly after that, we noticed that people were basically sharing the website themselves. Like they were just putting it out as an answer. Whenever someone asked that question, we started seeing that question get like asked less and less over time.
There were a few news studies where they would like reference levels as like the economy's going down or the economy's going up.
Yeah.
None of those were planted. Like you never spent money on those like marketing.
We never did paid marketing explicitly. We just felt like organic is the strongest way to grow.
How much were you making from that advertising for you to decide to go full time?
Yeah, I think we were making like something around 5 figures like annually. One of the biggest confusion points that we noticed that people had about levels in the industry was that no one knew what, the leveling would translate to at another company if they were to switch companies. And so people like there were pockets of knowledge that people had, but it was very hard to know what level you should be placed at if you were to switch companies. And so Zahir himself was facing this problem. What happened was he was going to switch to LinkedIn, and he wanted to confirm that the level that he was getting into at LinkedIn was actually representative of the level that he was at Amazon. And he had gotten promoted at Amazon, so he wanted to make sure that he was at the right level. And so that kind of gave us the light bulb for why not just create like a very simple way to compare levels across companies and just create like a very visual tool. And I joke about it now. It's almost like a PDF guide of where you can kind of expect to be when you switch companies. And so that's really how Levels started. Today we're known for like salaries and compensation information, but really it started with solving that problem of just mapping which level you would be at a different company. And so, you can imagine all the permutations of questions you would see would be things like, I'm a Google L3, where would I end up at Microsoft or at Amazon? And so we kind of mapped that. We just talked to like our friends. We got like leveling rubrics from kind of around the industry, and it was a very manually curated effort in the beginning. And from there, we kind of started getting eyeballs onto the site and then getting more and more people just contributing leveling rubrics themselves.
So what was the first version of the site? What did it let you do?
Yeah, all you could do on the site was just view, like you had like a toggle to like basically add a company.
Okay.
And then you could just view the levels like at each company next to each other and what it would translate to if you were to switch.
And then how did you go about getting eyes on it?
A lot of our efforts were in the beginning was just putting things out on different forms, like these questions that I just told you about, like on Quora, Reddit, like Blind at the time, like we just answered those questions ourselves. And then very shortly after that, we noticed that people were basically sharing the website themselves. Like they were just putting it out as an answer. Whenever someone asked that question, we started seeing that question get like asked less and less over time. And I'm sure we had like some impact on that, which is pretty awesome. But yeah, like then it became like kind of like this de facto place. Like, okay, just go to levels.fyi. No one's even answering the question. They're just like, go to levels.fyi.
Yeah.
And that's how we started getting more and more company leveling rubrics, things like that as well.
I remember I would always send you the links on like the YouTube videos, because my friends would send me YouTube videos of like, oh, here's how to like get an internship at Apple. And they would always reference Levels. Or there were a few news studies where they would like reference Levels as like the economy's going down or the economy's going up.
Yeah.
None of those were planted. Like you never spent money on those like marketing.
I mean, we did our own marketing. So like, I mean, me and Zahir would post all the time. We would have our own Levels account where we would try to post things, and even just media, just that eventually got into the hands of someone more influential, and then people would share it. But we never did paid marketing explicitly. We just felt like organic is the strongest way to grow. I mean, word of mouth is probably the number one metric that we were tracking. Is like, I mean, it's hard to track, but it's the only way that you really know you're building something worthwhile is like if someone's willing to share it with their friend. And so that's really what made us like kind of shaped our product thinking, and like what we were building is like, how can we make this thing that people will definitely want to share with their friends?
So one thing that's interesting is I feel like a lot of people don't know that you guys have a monetization aspect, or that it's even like a full blown company. But you guys have been monetizing almost since day one, right? So what did it look like early on?
Yeah, I'll give you like the kind of the path we took, and like we had like a bunch of different models and things we tried that took us to today. But today, like we have, I would say, 3 pillars to kind of our revenue side. And the first pillar is essentially we have the candidate side, where we help basically candidates increase their job outcomes. And that could be, you know, things from resume review, our negotiation service, and we have like different kind of levels to that as well. Like based on your seniority, you would be booking different packages there. And candidates love it. And it's been a great way for us to also just have a bird's eye view in the market. It allows us to know like who's hiring at this time, who's not hiring at this time. And then also just understand like what's going on, and kind of build this like real-time knowledge base of how the market's performing and doing. And that's been extremely valuable. Now on the flip side, this has been more recent, but we've been working with companies on their employer branding and kind of just basically advertising their jobs, as well as compensation benchmarking. So the same data that you see on the site, we kind of put it into a format where compensation analysts can use it to kind of benchmark compensation within their organizations. And so that's been one of our fastest growing sides of the business, and we've been pretty excited about. And okay, and like to rewind back, I guess, to day one, we were actually pretty intentional about making revenue from like very early on. I think I was referencing how we started with leveling.
Right.
Very shortly after that, we basically started to collect data, compensation data around, but using leveling as kind of like this crux that people can also enter, because we had that structured data. And we realized our salaries were way more accurate than anything else out there, because we were collecting that leveling granularity. And so as we started to collect that, and you know, this is kind of like our startup story with Levels.fyi, is like we started with a Google form. And so naturally a Google form feeds into like a Google Sheet. And so we actually just published that Google Sheet as like basically the site. So you would just come to the site and it would just be that Google Sheet.
That was the whole site.
That was the whole site. Yeah.
That's crazy.
And then very quickly we were like, wait, like people want more stuff. Like we want to do aggregations, more interesting things. And so that's when we were like, okay, let's use the Google Sheets as a backend, and we'll just put like some interface on top of it. And back then, like, you know, there was Google Sheets was a little bit more open, because I think now you have to do like auth or whatever. But back then you could literally change like a query parameter at the end of like the Sheets URL and just be like values like equals JSON or something, and it would just spit out a JSON. Yeah,
that's crazy. I didn't know.
And so like we literally just took that Google Sheet link, and we would just be fetching it and just like populating our page. And it was completely open. Anyone could just take it, and it was that was just how we got started. And then from there, like, you know, as the load increased, the Google Sheet was slow. There was, you know, we had too much data points, and so we decided, okay, what's like the next step we could take here? We weren't getting rid of the sheet anytime soon. It was more like we were like, okay, now let's use like a Lambda function, call the sheet like, and get it all into like a JSON file, and we'll heavily cache that JSON file, like or at least like refresh it maybe every 15 minutes or so. And so we did, and so that was like the next phase of kind of you know, our growth. It was like, okay, like we just had this massive JSON file. And then after a while, we're like, okay, this JSON file's not working anymore. We reached our 5 million cell limit on Google Sheets. Like we got to figure out like how we can do something like more sustainable. And that's really when we hopped over to like an actual database. But even before that, we tried things like sharding our Google like workspace into like multiple workspaces so that we can get like more than 5 million cells because of that limit. But yeah, that was a huge sidetrack from what we were talking about revenue. Right? Yeah. So revenue, we tried to be somewhat intentional about making like some revenue from like pretty early on.
Right.
And so very soon after we launched like salaries, we we started basically advertising for this company called Triple White.
What did they do?
So they were basically like a recruiting firm for technical talent, but
Interesting.
but they would like have their own vetting system. It's almost like you could think of it as like if you were Triple Byte accredited, you went through their like initial interview process, and so you had some level of accreditation or verification that you're a good engineer.
Okay.
And so we would funnel leads to them, and you know, initially it was just pure advertising, or actually initially it was like we were doing like a model where we got some percentage of a person's salary if they were to actually land a job through that like funnel. But of course that would take like time. It would take like months to get that like check or whatever. And so eventually we pivoted into like pure advertising. We were doing CPC, like a cost per click model where, you know, they were just paying us some number of dollars like per click. And that way we could accommodate other advertisers who were not like, you know, doing just purely recruiting. And so we kind of created this like semi marketplace of like just ads on the site. And you know, it was good revenue, and it allowed us to make the jump to full time, me and my co-founder. But you know, soon after that, we were like, okay, we need like advertising is inherently like in some sense you're selling yourself short because you're advertising some product that they're getting some more value.
You're funneling your own users' money into someone else's bank account.
Exactly. And so like we wanted to capture more of that. And so that's when we decided to build out our negotiation service. And that was, I think around COVID, or maybe even a little bit before COVID, we decided to do our first kind of offering of the service. And that was just me and Zahir like getting on phone calls and just like helping people out.
And so for context, you said that first kind of like bit of advertising is what let you guys go full time on it. How much were you making from that advertising for you to decide to go full time?
Yeah, I think we were making like something around 5 figures like annually.
Okay.
And it was enough just for us to be like, yo, like this is draining most of our time anyway. And it's really fun.
Yeah. Okay.
Might as well just go full time.
Right.
And the revenue definitely made it easier. Don't get me wrong, because I feel like if we had zero revenue, maybe the equation would have been a little bit different.
Right.
But it was like obviously organically going off like at the, like, you know, we didn't have SEO at this time or anything. It was just kind of people spreading it by word of mouth, and we were getting great traction and ad dollars were coming in. And so that made it a very, very easy decision for us to, hey, let's try this out. There's something here. Let's go full time. And I really encourage all my friends to kind of take that side project approach, just because I feel like when you make like a company formal or something formal, like you end up becoming too formal and you start thinking about like the details that don't matter, like the incorporation of the company,
the incorporation, the equity, the Slack workspace, all the stuff except for actually building the thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And so in the side project mindset, you're just purely focused on just doing the thing and having fun, because if you're not having fun, then why are you even doing this thing on the side? Like, and so that's been like, I think the greatest way, like we take a stepwise approach to everything. Like, okay, let's make our first dollar, get our first user. Okay, now let's make it $10, 10 users, and then keep going. And you keep doing that. And you see that with our Google Sheets story and like everything. Like you just don't like, I feel like it's very easy and very tempting to do like to take the approach of just, hey, I'm just going to go all in. I'm just going to raise like $100 million and just, you know, actually put everything into this like venture. But I feel like just take it a step at a time, see how it goes. Like just way more fun, I think, because you're not like putting all this like pressure on yourself.
Yeah. It's like manufactured pressure. It doesn't actually lead towards.
Yeah. And I mean, I think some people are just good about it. Like some people can raise 100 million and just be like, yeah, whatever. And like still do their thing. And that's great. But like, but we really like that stepwise approach. Just like, okay, hit that, then we do this, then we do that.
Right.
And, you know, like we unlock the thing after we actually get to the first step.